Meanwhile, Dr. Arun tried to connect his computer, so we will discuss a bit. Uh, so the most common nerve injuries which come across in our hospital, anybody can suggest the peripheral nerve injuries? Any postgraduate students?
Radial nerve.
Okay, so let's take the case of the radial nerve. So the most common nerve injury pattern with radial nerve happens with elbow injuries. Okay, so in a supracondylar fractures of the humerus, that is the most common sign. You have a sequelae of radial nerve injury. So which type of supracondylar fractures? Is it a posteromedial injury or a posterolateral injury is very common with radial nerve injuries? That the
Medial.
supracondylar fractures based upon the dislocation can be posteromedial or posterolateral. So which of these supracondylar fractures can produce radial nerve injuries? Anybody?
Posteromedial.
So posteromedial. So if you say posteromedial, what happening with the distal fragment? The distal fragment is gone posteromedial or the proximal fragment is gone posteromedial?
Distal fracture.
The distal fragment is gone posteromedial. So the sharp spike of the proximal fragment is the major culprit for nerve injuries. Okay. So if the distal fragment has gone for posteromedial, the sharp spike of the proximal fragment will be on which side?
Lateral.
Lateral, exactly. So in that case, the sharp spike which protrudes on the lateral side presses on the radial nerve and can give you trouble. So in case of a posterolateral dislocation of the supracondylar fracture, what is the most common injury can be expected?
Ulnar nerve injury.
Yeah, so more than ulnar nerve, it normally compresses on the brachial artery. So you are more worried about the pulsations of the limb if the dislocation of which type?
Posterolateral.
Posteromedial or posterolateral?
Posterolateral.
Posterolateral.
Yeah, posterolateral. So in that, you have to be really worried about the perfusion of the limb. You will be looking for the pulse. But if the pulse is absent, is it okay? We can wait for, or we should do immediate exploration?
Check for the capillary fill and color.
Exactly, exactly. So sometimes it's not necessary to have the pulsation to be present. Okay, so in that case, what you need to do for is a assessment of the perfusion with capillary refill. Okay, so if there is a nerve injury, what do you do normally immediately? You explore the nerve during the fixation, or you do wait for?
Stabilize the fracture.
Exactly, exactly. So when you have a closed injury, so like a supracondylar fracture or any other fracture, so if there is a closed injury, it is not mandatory to explore the nerve during fixation.
So welcome everyone to our OSCE session on peripheral nerve injuries. Today we have Dr. Arun Ravindran with us. He is the assistant professor at SNIMS Hospital and he is a hand and reconstructive microsurgeon. He has done his fellowship in the same from CMC Vellore. And thank you, sir, for agreeing to do our OSCE session at such a short notice. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. Good evening, everybody. So I am Dr. Arun, currently working as assistant professor in SNIMS Hospital. So I thank GIS sir for giving me this opportunity.
Okay, you go ahead. That's it.
So it's a case of 24-year-old male with a history of assault 3 months back, and the wound sutured at local hospital, and he came with difficulty in moving his wrist and fingers, and there is no improvement in function over the last 3 months. So this is the most common case you can get as a short case in the DNB exam. So in spotters also. So usually, so with the spotters, there will be some sub questions like this. What are the investigations will you suggest what is tinel sign, what are the management options in this case, like that. So can somebody volunteer? What's your
Sir,
diagnosis?
radial nerve injury, sir.
Yes, very good. Radial nerve injury with a wrist drop. Okay.
Yeah.
So radial nerve injury at the level of lower third of right arm with wrist drop. Can you tell what is tinel sign?
Sir, if axonomatosis or complete dissection is there, when we tap on the nerve,
Okay.
so a paresthesia is produced on the distribution.
Yes. So we have to percuss along the course of the nerve from distal to proximal. So we will get a tingling sensation or paresthesia, and it will be radiating along the course of the nerve. That is tinel sign. So what is the significance of tinel sign? In which all situations you can get a tinel sign? So mainly it indicates nerve regeneration, the newly growing axonal sprouts. So and it can also we can also get tinel sign in conditions like carpal tunnel syndrome, long-standing cases because of demyelination. So long-standing compression of the nerve can cause demyelination of the nerve, and that can also give tinel sign. So how to make use of this tinel sign to assess the nerve recovery? So we have to follow up the patient frequently and check the tinel sign, where we are getting the tinel sign in each visit. So this diagram, so this is the site of injury, and so in the first few days the nerve will be degenerating fully, so there will not be any regeneration, and about 1 month, after 1 month period, the nerve will start regenerating. So the nerve is regenerating at a rate of about 1 millimeter per day. So after 2 months, so about after 2 months, we are expecting a tinel sign to be positive, and at about 6 centimeter distal to the site of injury, like this. So again after 2 months, so it should go distally, the site of maximum this tingling sensation or paresthesia. So this is how we make use of this tinel sign to assess the recovery of the nerve. Just going through the anatomy and the basic concepts of this nerve regeneration, so that you can understand the following questions also easily. So every peripheral nerve, we have an axon covered by myelin sheath, which is covered by endoneurium, and a group of endoneurium covered axons together form a fascicle, which is covered by perineurium, and a group of fascicles together form the peripheral nerve, which is covered by epineurium. So the entire nerve is covered by epineurium. So after a nerve injury, when new axonal sprouts grow, it should pass through the distal segment. So when the nerve is completely transected, this newly growing axonal sprouts cannot pass through the endoneurial tube distally. So what happens is that a group of axons will together form a swelling there known as neuroma. So and the regeneration of nerve will not be occurring properly. And so after the nerve get injured, distal to the injury, there will be secondary degeneration or Wallerian degeneration, and proximal to the injury, there is primary or retrograde degeneration. This primary degeneration occurs only up to the first node of Ranvier. And you can get a sub-question like this. So what is the classification of nerve injuries? Everybody should know. So the most common classification is Seddon's classification: neuropraxia, axonotomosis, and neurotomosis. So in neuropraxia type of injury, can somebody describe what is neuropraxia injury, axonotomosis, and neurotomosis?
Neuropraxia is just the compression, sir.
Yes.
And axonomatosis is only the axon is being cut. And
okay, only the
neurotomosis
axon.
Yeah.
Okay. Neurotomosis?
Complete dissection of the nerve.
Complete dissection. So how these only the axons are getting injured, because and the coverings are intact? How it can happen? What is the mechanism of injury in such cases? Axonotomosis type of injury.
Traction injuries.
Yes, very good. Traction injuries. So it usually occurs in traction injuries. So in neuropraxia, we are expecting a complete recovery within a sometimes few days. Average period we are telling is 6 weeks. Axonotomosis also we are expecting a complete recovery. Neurotomosis needs surgical repair. Then Sunderland classification also, he has classified into 5 grades. The grade 1 is neuropraxia itself, grade 2 is axonotomosis, and grade 5 is neurotomosis. Grade 3 says the endoneurium is disrupted and the perineurium and epineurium are intact, and grade 4 the perineurium is also disrupted. So in grade 1 and 2 there will be complete recovery. Grade 5 there will not be any recovery at all usually. So in grade 3 and 4 there can some recovery can happen. But so grade 1 and 2 will there will be full complete recovery. And the investigations in nerve injuries that we can be another that is sub question. So nerve conduction study, it will help us in knowing what type of nerve injury it is and the site of injury. So in this case, in our case, the radial nerve from the clinical examination, it is sure that it is almost completely transected. So there is no much role for a nerve conduction study here actually. So we have to explore the nerve anyway. But in conditions like entrapment, for example, like carpal tunnel syndrome, a patient presenting with a numbness of the fingers. Suppose the patient is also having some pain around the anterior aspect of the proximal forearm. So the medial nerve can be compressed at that sides also. So there can be compression at a higher level also. So in such cases, this nerve conduction study will help us and to locate the site of the lesion. In ulnar nerve palsy, like cubital tunnel syndrome, and all such cases, definitely the nerve conduction study will help. And in electromyography, we can assess the recovery, whether the muscle is still denervated or the reinnervation has started. After repairing the nerve, it will take a few months for the muscle to start working. So at that time, while by doing an EMG, we can check whether the nerve recovery is going on or not. Imaging, ultrasonography is enough actually in most of the nerve injury cases, but unfortunately in most of the centers, most of the radiologists are not that much experts, and most of the people are not that much interested. I felt like that in musculoskeletal imaging. So many centers have to depend upon MRI. So if there is a center with a musculoskeletal imaging, USG is enough for most of the nerve injuries for tracking the course of the nerve, which all sites there is compression, whether the nerve is totally transected or not. Actually, ultrasound is the better investigation. Then, so I think everybody knows this. What is the name of this splint? Can somebody tell? In radial nerve palsy, the splint used in radial nerve palsy.
Cock-up splint.
Yeah, Cock-up splint. Can you tell what is the role of splint in radial nerve palsy?
To prevent the contraction.
Contracture means contracture in a flexed position. To keep the joint in a functional position. That's good. Any more action? There's one more important function that most of the people will not tell. The examiner wants to hear that also. Imagine the wrist is kept in a flexed position for a long period. The extensor tendons will be excessively stretched. Okay, so to avoid excessive stretching of the extensor tendons, to keep the wrist in an extended position. That is the another use of this splint. So if we keep the wrist flexed in a flexed attitude for a long period, the extensor tendons will be excessively stretched and it will lose its stretchability and all. So this is a dynamic type of Cock-up splint, and the first one is a static type. And what is the role of physiotherapy?
Helps
Can
to
somebody
prevent the
tell
muscle wasting.
how it can prevent the muscle wasting?
Because if the limb is if the extensors are not using, it will cause disuse atrophy. It will result in
Once the nerve is injured, till the time the nerve gets recovered, it will take a few months. So there will be obviously muscle wasting. Some more important thing, can you tell? One is to keep the joints up with contractures to prevent stiffness of the joints. So after the muscle gets start acting, if the joint is stiff, there is
Just check it up. Any problems with Dr. Adam? So meanwhile, we will discuss about the physiotherapy. So what are the different modalities you use in a physiotherapy of a nerve injury? Anybody?
tense.
Yeah. So what do you mean by tense?
Transcutaneous electric nerve stimulation.
So how it helps in physiotherapy?
That it helps helps the regeneration of the nerve.
It helps the regeneration because it maintains the tract. Because if the electric impulse is not passed through the tract for pretty long time, the conduction will cease. So till how long the nerve, even if you regenerate after some time, how long it can be wait? Or means if you do a anastomosis after certain time, it is not going to work. So how long you can wait for after a nerve injury repair?
6 months.
So
5
after
months.
6 months, if you do a repair, it won't be helpful.
We can.
So where the nerve ends end in the muscle, most of the nerve ends can be of cutaneous supply or it can be a motor. So that sort of a nerve is known as a nerve which carries cutaneous as well as motor nerve impulses is known as what sort of a nerve?
Mixed nerve.
Mixed nerve. Very good. So most of the nerves which we do a repair, ulnar nerve is an example of a dash nerve. Mixed nerve?
Mixed nerve.
So anybody can say the name of a pure cutaneous nerve, which is very important.
Lateral cutaneous nerve of thigh.
Exactly. In hand, anybody in the hand? Superficial branch of radial nerve. So Arun, are you ready?
Yes, sir.
So you can continue. Okay, so the compression of the superficial branch of radial nerve. Oh yeah, he's back. Okay, Arun.
Can somebody tell what is the treatment in this case? It's a 3-month-old injury with no recovery.
So nerve transfer.
Neurolysis.
Neurolysis. Okay, then first we have to definitely it requires nerve exploration. So there is no recovery at all. We can do the basic investigations. So definitely in such cases, practical purpose, we will explore the nerve. Okay, and we can repair the nerve, and sometimes there will be need for nerve grafting. In 3-month-old period, anyway, there will be need for nerve grafting. Tens will be slightly retracted and degenerated. So some gap will be there, obviously. Okay, so and if the nerve is not recovering, we have to then the next option after the nerve repair, we have to wait for nerve recovery. And if it is not recovering, then the next option is tendon transfer. And some people now advocate early tendon transfer because in this level, after the repair of this level, these forearm muscles have to start working. For it will take a few months, about 6 to 7 months, for the nerve to grow up to this much distance. And after that, for getting the clinical recovery, it will take a few more months. So some surgeons now do directly tendon transfer for early recovery. So it will give a better result. So I'm just showing you how the nerve grafting is being done. The most common donor we are taking is the sural nerve. Sural nerve is a sensory nerve, so it will cause a minor sensory deficit in the foot, dorsum of the foot. Otherwise, there is no problem in taking the sural nerve. So we are making sural nerve cutting into multiple pieces and making a cable graft like this, and we will fill the nerve graft like this. Somebody told neurolysis. I will explain that. So when we explore the nerve, sometimes we will see some swellings like this at the injured site. So what happens is that all the axonal sprouts will not be able to pass to the distal fragment. So this group of axons will form a swelling there. It is known as neuroma. So when we see a neuroma, what we do is that we will stimulate the proximal part of the nerve and look for the contraction of the muscles. Okay, so if it is muscles, we stimulate the proximal part of the nerve and the muscles are contracting well, that means some recovery has happened. In such cases, we will just do a neurolysis. Neurolysis means we will make the nerve free from the scar. There is external neurolysis and also internal neurolysis. External neurolysis means we will make the nerve separate from the surrounding fibrous tissue. In internal neurolysis, we will open the fascicles and make the fascicles separated. The internal fibrous tissue also we will separate and make the fascicles free. So that is neurolysis. And sometimes if there is no contraction at all, we are stimulating the proximal part of the nerve, if there is no contraction of the distal muscles. So we will excise the neuroma and do a nerve grafting there. Okay. And the types of nerve repair can be another sub question. The most commonly done is epineural repair. That is an easier thing we can do with a loop magnification, and sometimes without any microscope you can do an epineural repair. And if you have a high magnification microscope, you can do a epiperineurography, including the perineurium also. Now coming to tendon transfers in radial nerve palsy, it's also very important, especially the Jones transfer, and all the senior examiners are also interested in these areas. So what all tendons, what are the tendon transfers we usually do in a radial nerve palsy? So we are concerned about wrist extension, loss of wrist extension, loss of the joint, and loss of also. So these three things we have to correct. So anybody tell what are the commonly taken donors we take for giving wrist extension? Can somebody volunteer? So what are the wrist extensors? What are the extensors of the wrist?
Extensor digitorum communis.
Extensor digitorum communis mainly extends the metacarpophalangeal joints of the fingers.
Extensor carpi ulnaris.
Extensor carpi ulnaris, then
Extensor carpi radius longus and brevis.
Extensor carpi radialis longus and brevis. Okay, very good. So extensor carpi radialis longus, brevis, and extensor carpi ulnaris. So we have three tendons. These are the extensors of the wrist. Out of this, we commonly use the extensor carpi radialis brevis as the recipient. So the donor muscle we commonly take is pronator teres. Can somebody tell why we are choosing extensor carpi radialis brevis and not extensor carpi radialis longus? The extensor carpi radialis longus is laterally situated. It is attached to the second metacarpal, and extensor carpi radialis brevis is somewhere in the middle of the forearm. So if we are transferring to the extensor carpi radialis, what happens is that along with the wrist extension, there will be a radial deviation of the wrist also. To avoid that, we are giving the donor tendon to extensor carpi radialis brevis. It is situated almost in the middle of the forearm, so that the wrist extension will be through the midline. Okay, we are giving to extensor carpi. We are giving to extensor carpi radialis longus, there will be some radial deviation also. So that is why we are preferring extensor carpi radialis brevis. So this is the most commonly used transfer for regaining wrist extension. It is pronator teres to extensor carpi radialis brevis. Then comes to MCP extension. We have told now MCP extension is done by extensor digitorum. Okay, can somebody tell what is the donor tendon here we commonly use?
FCU.
Yes, very good. FCU is given to EDC. That is the most common. Another option is FCR. Flexor carpi radialis can also be taken. Okay. Then it is thumb extension. What we do is this palmaris longus is the commonly used donor in this case for regaining thumb extension. And if you use this term, the examiner will be very happy. Palmaris longus to rerouted EPL. What is rerouted EPL? I will tell. You can see this diagram. This palmaris longus we are cutting from here, and we are taking it out and giving. We are bringing it to the volar aspect. And what we do is that we are giving the palmaris longus to this rerouted EPL tendon. So by doing this, when the palmaris longus contracts along with the interphalangeal joint extension of the thumb, there will be some radial abduction also. So the deficit by the radial nerve palsy, the abductor pollicis longus will be paralyzed. So the radial abduction also will be weak, and so the radial abduction and also the some palmar abduction we can get by this transfer. Okay, so this will help in the abduction of the thumb also. That is the importance of rerouted EPL. So once again, please note, okay, you write this much only, you will get the full mark. Pronator tears to ECRB, FCU to EDC, and Palmaris longus to rerouted EPL. This is the most commonly done procedure in a radial nerve palsy tendon transfer. Okay. Some, if you in a Viva session, some senior examiners can ask what is Jones transfer, what is the transfer done by Jones. Okay, very difficult to remember all these things. This what I told is a modified Jones transfer, which is the preferred procedure in most of the institutions now. Okay. Can somebody tell what is the procedure? This procedure, what procedure is this?
Restitution.
Yeah, wrist arthrodesis. In some cases, there is no limited options. Sometimes all the nerves are paralyzed. We don't have enough donor tendons. So it is better to keep the wrist in a neutral position or slightly extended position. So wrist arthrodesis is the option in such case. So more commonly done in brachial plexus palsies. Total brachial plexus palsies. There are no options in the distal aspect for tendon transfer. So we will fuse the wrist and we will do some reconstructive works for finger flexion. That I will discuss along with the brachial plexus injuries. So this is wrist arthrodesis. So coming to the next spotter, this is a 58-year-old man. He presented with pain in the extending the index finger and the thumb on the right side. Wrist extension is within normal limits, and on examination there is palpable soft tissue swelling on the dorsal aspect of the forearm. What is your diagnosis? Can somebody tell what is the diagnosis? In this picture you can see he is not able to extend the thumb and also the index finger. This picture shows the other fingers are extending. Some problems only with the thumb and index finger. Wrist extension is normal. And there is palpable soft tissue swelling in the dorsal aspect of the forearm.
Anterior introsseous nerve.
Not anterior, this is posterior introsseous nerve palsy. Thumb extension is extensor. The other one is extensor indicis and X part of extensor digitorum. Okay, so soft forearm, it can be in tumor, in soft tissue tumor. So how, what all investigations will you do? Again, always tell X-ray in orthopedic. You should tell is X-ray before. X-ray is a must in our orthopedic cases, and ultrasound and sometimes MRI may be needed in such cases. This case was actually a lipoma compressing the posterior introsseous nerve, and the treatment is obviously the removal of the tumor and decompression of the nerve. Okay. So just a diagrammatic representation showing the different levels of radial nerve. So you have to know which all muscles are supplied by radial nerve. The triceps is the first muscle. Before entering the spiral groove, it will give some branches to the triceps. And then brachialis, brachioradialis, extensor carpi radialis longus are given in the spiral groove. Then comes extensor carpi radialis brevis, and the supinator, and the other extensors of the extensor muscles in the forearm. So usually along with the shaft of humerus fracture, these branches will get damaged, and this is known as high radial nerve palsy. So the manifestation will be wrist drop, finger drop, and thumb drop. And because of the loss of extension, extensor carpi radialis longus and brevis are paralyzed, there will be wrist drop. Because of the EDC paralysis, there will be finger drop, and because of the EPL paralysis, there will be thumb drop. This is known as high radial nerve palsy. When the paralysis occurs in a lower position, at a lower level, this extensor carpi radialis longus and brevis will escape. Like this, I got a case in my examination. This is a proximal forearm tumor causing posterior introsseous nerve palsy. So in such cases, the wrist will be spared. The wrist extension will be spared. And there is a another type of nerve palsy, radial nerve palsy, very high radial nerve palsy. It usually occurs in crutch palsy, where there is elbow extension is also weak at the level of axilla. Okay. We can move on to the next spotter. It's a 25-year-old male. He had a glass piece injury. You can see the scar mark of the injury here. 3 months back, initially treated elsewhere by skin suturing, now presented with difficulty in performing fine movements. So, what is your diagnosis?
Sir, ulnar nerve palsy.
Ulnar nerve palsy. So, you can see the clawing here. What do you mean by clawing? Can somebody explain what is clawing?
Sir, extension at the metacarpophalangeal joint
Okay.
and
Okay.
interphalangeal joint are flex.
Yeah, use the term hyperextension. Okay, hyperextension at the metacarpophalangeal joint and flexion of the interphalangeal joints. So usually in ulnar nerve palsy, the little finger and ring fingers will be affected. The index and middle fingers will not be affected. What is Bouvier's maneuver? Can anybody tell Bouvier's maneuver? You may not be much familiar with that. So it is to decide what type of before proceeding with the claw correction surgery, we have to check something. So Bouvier's maneuver is that you can see the clawing here. Just correct the hyperextension at the MCP joint. Block the hyperextension like this. Then ask the patient to extend the interphalangeal joints. So here we are checking actually the integrity of the central slip and lateral bands of extensor apparatus. Okay, so if the patient can extend the interphalangeal joints, that is means the extensor mechanism is intact. So in such cases, only stabilization of metacarpophalangeal joint is enough. Either static procedure or dynamic procedure. Just correct the hyperextension of the metacarpophalangeal joints. Other things will go smoothly. Okay, and if the patient cannot extend it fully, there are some more things too. So it will. So I think that much is not needed for your exam purpose, I think. So if the patient is able to extend the interphalangeal joints, it means the patient needs only just a stabilization of MCP joint. So, and I will show some of the common claw correction surgeries. This also you should know. If you refer your textbooks, you will see a lot of procedures. It is very difficult to remember all these procedures, claw correction surgeries. So the commonly done surgeries, there are two types, static procedures and dynamic procedures. So the one is a Sangoli capsulodesis. It's a very simple procedure. We are just doing a capsulodesis on the volar aspect of the MCP joint. This is only to correct the hyperextension of the MCP joint so that the MCP joint can be in a neutral or a slightly flexed position. Then another common procedure done is Fowler's stenodesis. Here we are using a tendon graft, making it into 4 slips and inserting into the radial band of the extensor apparatus. Okay. Then there are dynamic procedures also. The most commonly taken donor in a claw correction surgery is flexor digitorum superficialis. Okay, so many people have modified these procedures. So I will tell you the most important thing. So this is the most commonly done surgery, Sangoli lasso procedure. What we are doing is that we are taking the middle finger FDS and making it into 4 slips. Okay, and we are attaching it into the A1 pulley so that the metacarpophalangeal joint hyperextension is corrected. Okay, this procedure will work only when the patient is having free extension of the interphalangeal joints. Okay, as I told in Bouvier's maneuver. So Sangoli lasso procedure, you can directly write in all the what's the most common tendon transfer procedure for claw correction. Then there are different sites of insertion. Other than the A1 pulley, we can insert into the radial band of the extensor apparatus. Here the advantage is that if the extensor apparatus is weak, this will help. Okay, when the Bouvier's maneuver, when the patient is not able to extend fully the interphalangeal joints, we have to give the tendon to the extensor apparatus. The name of that procedure is modified Stiles Bunnell procedure. Bunnell is a pioneer in tendon transfer surgery, tendon reconstruction and surgeries. Bunnell and Paul Brand, almost all the procedures are modifications done by them. So you can write those terms. Even if you don't know anything, you can just write Bunnell procedure or Brand procedure that will give you some mark. Rather than getting 0 mark, you can get a half mark. So there is a one more procedure in the modification of the Sangoli lasso. It is an extensor pulley insertion technique described by Anderson. we are using a part of A2 pulley also. This A2 pulley is completely attached to the proximal phalanx. So when we are including the A2 pulley also as the insertion site, it will give some more flexion of the metacarpophalangeal joint. Okay. In some cases, when the FDS is not available, like there is associated median nerve palsy also, we have to go for other donor options. The commonly done is ECRB or ECRL transfer. This is known as Brandt procedure, Brandt method. Here we are taking the ECRL and with the tendon graft, we are attaching it to the extensor expansion. So all these procedures work by tenodesis effect. I will tell what is tenodesis effect. When you extend the wrist, the FDS transfer, when you extend the wrist, the FDS will get stretched and it will help in contracting the flexion of the fingers. So extend the wrist for getting flexion of the fingers. That is by tenodesis action. So we make use of this tenodesis action in almost all the tendon transfer surgeries, especially these dynamic procedures in claw correction surgeries. Then in ulnar nerve palsy, the patient will be having difficulty in key pinch. For key pinch, you should bring this thumb or should be opposed to the index finger to do a key pinch. So thumb adduction will be weak because the adductor pollicis is paralyzed. So in such case, for thumb adduction, we can do a transfer of extensor carpi radialis brevis. And FDS also can be used for thumb adduction. And for index finger abduction also should be there for proper key pinch along with thumb adduction. For that, we can use the abductor pollicis longus, which is applied by the radial nerve. This can be attached to the first dorsal interossei. Then in high ulnar nerve palsy, the long flexors, FDS and FDP will be paralyzed. FDP of the little finger and ring finger paralyzed. This will cause grip weakness. In such cases, the side stitching of the middle ring and little fingers is an option to provide proper flexion of ring finger and little finger. So side stitching of FDP. So this is just a comparison of complete claw hand and partial claw hand. These things can be asked as a spotters, can be given as spotters. Here you can see all the fingers are affected. This occurs in combined ulnar and median nerve palsies. And this partial claw hand, including the ring finger and little finger only, this occurs in ulnar nerve palsy. Can somebody tell what is the action of lumbricals? They can ask all these things as sub questions. Okay.
Flexion of metacarpophalangeal joint and extension of interphalangeal joint.
Yeah, very good. This is L for lumbricals. So flexion of metacarpophalangeal joints and extension of interphalangeal joints. This is how we can check the lumbricals. So this action of lumbricals is supported by interossei also. That is the reason why there is no clawing in isolated median nerve palsy. Okay, in isolated ulnar nerve palsy, you will get clawing because the third and fourth lumbricals are paralyzed and also the interossei are. Okay, but in isolated median nerve palsy, the first and second lumbricals are paralyzed, but the interossei are working. So you will not get a claw hand there. Okay, because the interossei will support lumbricals in its action. So that is the reason for the lack of clawing in isolated median nerve palsy. Can anybody name this sign? This is another sign in ulnar nerve palsy. There are so many clinical signs described in ulnar nerve palsy. Can anybody? This is the
Wartenberg sign.
area. Yeah, very good. Wartenberg sign. What is Wartenberg sign?
Weakness of abducted digital element.
It's a persistent abduction or inability to adduct the little finger. Can somebody try this? The area of interest here is the metacarpophalangeal joint.
Okay, sir.
Okay, sign.
This is not okay sign. You can see there is a hyperextension of the metacarpophalangeal joint. It will not be there in okay sign. Okay sign, I will tell you. Yeah, we are coming to that. Yeah, the name of this sign is Gini sign. What happens is that there is hyperextension of the metacarpophalangeal joint. This is because in ulnar nerve, the metacarpophalangeal joint is flexed by flexor pollicis brevis. So it has two heads. One head is supplied by median nerve and one head is supplied by ulnar nerve. So if we are getting and Cheney sign in an isolated ulnar nerve palsy, it means both of the flexor pollicis brevis heads will be supplied by ulnar nerve. Maybe some anatomical variation. And this we can get also in combined median and ulnar nerve palsies. I don't know whether these things will be asked for your examinations, some or higher level, but all these things are described in the textbooks. This is known as Massey sign. Can somebody explain what has happened here? What is the finding here? The name you leave, it's okay, difficult. What has happened here? What abnormality you see in this picture? Hello? Hello? Okay, I'm waiting for somebody's response.
Index finger's extensor tendon is contracted.
This is seen in ulnar nerve palsy. Clovis, this is, again, we are talking about ulnar nerve palsies. So what has happened here? You can see something here. Just there is a transverse metacarpal arch normally. Okay, there is loss of transverse metacarpal arch. That is the finding here. I will show you the next. This is Massey sign. See, this is the normal hand. You can see this. This is the transverse metacarpal arch. So when we draw a line from the fifth metacarpal head to the horizontal line, it will be there will be 30 to 40 degree angle. Here it is only 0 to 10 degree angle because the reversal of metacarpal arch has happened. This commonly occurs in this ulnar nerve palsy because of the intrinsic paralysis. And the problem with this is that inability of the patient to cup water in the hand. With taking water in the hand from the tap will be difficult. So what is Duchenne sign? Somebody? Duchenne sign. Duchenne sign. Duchenne sign is clawing itself, ulnar clawing itself. Okay. Ask the patient to extend all the fingers. In isolated ulnar nerve palsy, the little finger and ring finger will remain in this clawed position. This is known as Duchenne sign, ulnar claw hand itself. So one more sign, finger flexion sign, because in low ulnar nerve palsy, the interossei will be weak. So when you check, ask the patient to, when you check the card test, when the long flexors are acting, so when the patient try to adduct the fingers, there will be some flexion of the long flexion of the fingers because of the long flexors. These long flexors also have a mild adduction, contribute to the adduction of the fingers also. That is the reason for getting this sign. Okay. I think everybody know this. Know this. Name this sign. I think this is the most important chance for getting in more chance for getting in the exam. This side. Hello.
Fromen sign, sir.
Yeah, very good. Fromen sign. So which muscle we are testing here in Fromen sign?
Adductor pollicis.
Flexor.
Adductor pollicis. Adductor pollicis. We are testing adductor pollicis, and what happens is that we are asking the patient to hold a book like this in between the thumb and the palm. And what happens is in the right side, the ulnar nerve is paralyzed. Okay, so the patient and we are trying to take the book out from his hand. So what happens is that the patient will try to hold the book with his flexor pollicis longus. He will use his thumb to hold the book, the flexion of the interphalangeal joint of the thumb to hold the book. So in right side, there is the ulnar nerve is not acting. So the patient is using median nerve to hold the book. This is Fromen sign. So what are the prerequisites for this test becoming positive? The median nerve should be normal. Okay, and the thumb IP joint should be separate. This is also a favorite question of the examiner. What are the prerequisites for getting? So if you are in a combined median and ulnar nerve palsy, you will not get this sign. Okay, and some people has documented it as book test also in some textbooks. From a book test. Can somebody try? What is the name of this splint? What is the indication for its use? Hello?
You're trying
Knuckle binder
maintain
splint.
Yes, very good. Knuckle bender splint. What is the use of knuckle bender splint?
For ulnar nerve palsy.
Ulnar nerve palsy. What is the function? To correct the hyperextension of the metacarpophalangeal joint.
extension at type.
Yes, correct the hyperextension at the metacarpophalangeal joint. So ulnar nerve palsy, we are using this. So name the muscle we are testing in Egava's test. This is Egava's test. We are keeping the hand over a table and asking the patient to move the middle finger sideways. Which muscle we are testing here?
Dorsal inversion.
Yes, dorsal interossei. Dorsal interossei of the middle finger we are testing. Okay. So name this test. Cart test. Which muscle we are testing here? Which muscle we are testing here?
Lumbricals.
Not lumbricals.
Palmar
Palmar interossei. Palmar interossei. Palmar interossei gives adduction of the fingers, produces adduction of the fingers. Okay. Next one.
We'll keep it.
What is the name of this sign? Hello? Pointing index. Okay, good. Pointing index. Which nerve is affected here?
Median nerve.
Median nerve. Okay. What surgical procedure will you suggest for correcting this? I am coming to that. So, can somebody tell how the pointing index happens? In median nerve palsy, flexor digitorum superficialis is paralyzed. The long flexors of the fingers are flexor digitorum superficialis and flexor digitorum profundus. So, the flexor digitorum profundus of the index and middle fingers are paralyzed. Okay. So, in pointing index, but we are getting only extension of the index finger. Middle finger, the patient is able to flex the middle finger. How it happens? Theoretically, both the index finger and middle finger should be straight. So that is about the peculiarity of these four tendons. These middle, ring and little finger tendons, flexor tendons, have a common origin, common conjoint tendon. So when the ring and little fingers are flexed, the middle finger will also get flexed automatically. But the index finger is a separate tendon, it will remain straight. Okay, so that is the anatomy behind pointing index. So to correct this, either we can do a side stitching of index finger tendon to the other tendons, or a transfer. So another tendon transfer you should know. What is the tendon transfer for action of flexor digitorum profundus? We are taking extensor carpi radialis longus. ECRL to FDP transfer is the transfer we are using for getting fingers, flexion of the fingers. Okay. Which muscle is tested here?
FPL.
FPL, flexor pollicis longus. We have to stabilize the proximal phalanx, then ask the patient to flex the interphalangeal joint of the thumb. So flexor pollicis longus is tested here. So which tendon transfer is commonly used in paralysis of flexor pollicis longus to regain its function?
Anterior interossei.
Now I am asking about FPL, whether this for FPL paralysis, which tendon transfer you are using if the nerve is not recovering? It is radialis to FPL. So please note this: in median nerve palsy, high median nerve palsy, we have to make FPL functioning and also FDP functioning. Okay, then only we can get a flexion of the fingers. So for FPL, we are using brachioradialis, and for flexion of FDP, extensor carpi radialis longus. So ECRL to FDP, BR to FPL. These are the tendon transfers used in high median nerve palsy for getting flexion of the fingers. This is the OK sign. OK sign, it is seen in anterior interossei nerve palsy. You ask the patient to hold like this, make a 0. So here the flexion, the thumb interphalangeal joint should be flexed, and the index finger distal interphalangeal joint should also be flexed. Okay, so what happens in anterior interossei nerve palsy? Anterior interossei nerve supplies like FDP, FPL and pronator quadratus. So FDP is not acting, but FDS is acting. FDS is supplied by median nerve proper. So proximal interphalangeal joint the patient can flex, but distal interphalangeal joint he cannot flex. Okay, here also he is not able to flex the FPL. So the patient will hold like this only. Okay, he cannot do this. This is okay sign seen in anterior-introsious nerve palsy. So anterior-introsious nerve supplies FPL, FDP, and pronator quadratus. Okay. This is the most common case related with the peripheral nerves seen in an orthopedic OP. So everybody will be male presented with numbness of fingers and weakness.
Carpal tunnel.
Very good. Carpal tunnel syndrome. So what is the obvious finding here? You can see one thenar muscle wasting. Okay. So diagnostic carpal tunnel syndrome investigation, we can do an air conduction study to confirm. Treatment, everybody knows about carpal tunnel release, but I'm interested in some other thing. So what is the surgical procedure to correct the functional deficit? So we can do some tendon transfer to improve the function. Which function is affected here? That's my question.
Opposition, sir.
Yes, very good. Opposition. Abduction of the thumb and opposition. So for that, the surgery done is opponent's plasty. There are different types of opponent's plasty. In carpal tunnel syndrome, we commonly use the palmaris longus along with the palmar fascia. Okay, so a strip of palmar fascia we will take along with the palmaris longus and we will attach it to abductor pollicis brevis insertion. This is known as Kamitz opponent's plasty. Okay, this is the preferred. So a single incision, with a single incision we can release the carpal tunnel and also we can harvest the palmar fascia. Okay, so Kamitz opponent's plasty. Then another opponent's plasty with the flexor digitorum superficialis. We can reroute like this. So another picture. Okay, just remember FDS opponent's plasty. Then in cases where the suppose a median nerve is cut at the level of distal forearm or wrist and it is not recovering and you want to give the patient abduction. Okay, in such cases we cannot take the FDS because most probably the FDS also will be injured at the initial period. Okay, so we have to look for some other options. Nerve innervated tendon. The most commonly done is extensor indicis opponent's plasty. You're taking the extensor indicis. Index finger has two extensors of the MCP joint, extensor indicis and extensor digitorum. So extensor indicis we can take and reroute around the ulna to the palmar side and insert into the abductor pollicis brevis. Then one more opponent's plasty is there. It is done in congenital thumb hypoplasia to improve the function in congenital anomalies. It is Huber transfer. We are taking the abductor digitae minimi to give the opposition of the thumb. So there are 4 types of opponent's plasty. FTS opponent's plasty is the most common one used. Then in carpal tunnel syndrome, we are using Kamitz opponent's plasty with the palmaris longus and palmar fascia. In congenital anomalies, congenital hypoplasia of the thumb, we are using the abductor digitae minimi. It is known as Huber transfer. And one more transfer is extensor indicis transfer. Okay, you should be thorough with the principles of tendon transfers. The joint should be supple prior to transfer. Tissue equilibrium should be maintained. Donor should be of adequate strength and adequate excursion. Synergistic action is preferred. A straight line of pull. If we are moving, if we are not taking it in a straight line, it should cross only one pull. Okay, otherwise the power will be lost. One tendon should be transferred only for one function. Don't transfer one tendon for getting multiple functions. Okay. And the donor should be expendable. So these things are only theory part. Just for completion's sake, I told. Can somebody answer this? What is the abnormal structure you are seeing in this X-ray?
Sir, calcified tendon.
It's not calcified tendon. It's one structure which causes entrapment of median nerve around the elbow. It's a supracondylar process. Supracondylar process. Yeah, there will be one ligament associated with this known as ligament of Struthers, and this will cause compression of the median nerve at the elbow. Okay, so you should know. I'm coming to entrapment neuropathy. You have seen carpal tunnel syndrome. It's the most common entrapment. There are also some structures that cause entrapment of the median nerve proximally, and also you have to know what are the sites of entrapment of ulnar nerve. Okay, one we told now the supracondylar process along with the ligament of Struthers. Okay, so one site of compression. Then another one is lacertus fibrosus, which is a fibrous band coming from the biceps tendon. Then FDS has an arch, fibrous arch at the proximal aspect. Then median nerve can be compressed between the two heads of pronator teres. So all these are the proximal structures. So when there is a proximal compression of the median nerve, we have to release all these structures. Okay. It will be difficult to differentiate which is the exact structure compressing the nerve. So we'll release all these structures. So all the finger numbness is not carpal tunnel syndrome. There can be compression of the median nerve in the proximal aspect also. There is one more thing, Ganser's muscle. It is accessory head of FPL that also can cause compression of the median nerve. Okay, so these are the sites of compression of median nerve causing entrapment. Some tests have been described. This is the test for pronator teres compression. You ask the patient to pronate the forearm against resistance. Patient will feel pain here. Okay, because of the tightening of the pronator teres. Then the flexor digitorum superficialis compression, you ask the patient to flex the middle finger against resistance. Then for lacertus fibrosus, flexion of the wrist against resistance, and OK sign for Anti-Roche syndrome. We have already discussed. Then you should know what are the sites of ulnar nerve compression. One is cubital tunnel syndrome. That's the most common entrapment after carpal tunnel syndrome. Cubital tunnel syndrome. That is compression of the ulnar nerve at the elbow. Then ulnar nerve can be compressed at the wrist also. It's Guyon's canal. So it's the structure of the structure is causing compression of ulnar nerve at the elbow. There is arcade of Struthers, then medial intermuscular septum, then the medial epicondyle and cubital tunnel is there. Cubital tunnel is between the medial epicondyle and the olecranon. There is a retinaculum here, like a flexor retinaculum, which can compress the ulnar nerve. And also the deep flexor pronator aponeurosis also can compress. So cubital tunnel syndrome. Next is Guyon's canal compression under the pisohamate ligament. The ulnar nerve passes. That is the area of Guyon's canal. After which it divides into superficial and deep branches. Okay. Can anybody tell what is chiralgia paresthetica or Wartenberg syndrome?
Superficial radial nerve compression.
Superficial radial nerve compression. So entrapment of superficial branch of radial nerve. What is the differential diagnosis? The patient will be presenting with the pain in the lateral aspect of the distal forearm. What is the differential diagnosis? Pain in the lateral aspect of the wrist. What is the most common diagnosis? Decurvane stenosynovitis. So how will you differentiate is that here there will be numbness. There will not be any sensory involvement in decurvane stenosynovitis. Then again, this is also there. The supinator, the proximal aspect, there is arcade of Rose. The differential diagnosis is tennis elbow. Coming to the last one. A 40-year-old male has presented with the difficulty in lifting up. Here, the patient is not able to lift his foot. On examination, there is thickening of the common peroneal nerve, which is not at the fibular neck region. So, what is your diagnosis?
Foot drop.
Okay, foot drop. How will you? What can be the etiology in this case? You can see thickening of the common peroneal nerve at the fibular neck region. When will you get thickening of peripheral nerves? The chronic infection.
Leprosy.
Yes, very good. Leprosy. Any peripheral nerve can get involved in leprosy. The most commonly involved is ulnar nerve, and next is common peroneal nerve. Okay. So how will you confirm your diagnosis? You are suspecting a leprosy because there is thickening. How will you confirm? Hello.
Biopsy.
Yes, very good. Nerve biopsy. Again, in the lower limb, we are taking sural nerve for biopsy. And in the upper limb, you can take the dorsal cutaneous branch of ulnar nerve. These are the two common nerves taken for biopsy. Okay. Which tendon transfer will you prefer in this case? The common peroneal nerve is paralyzed. You have to correct the foot drop. Which tendon transfer will you prefer?
tibialis posterior.
Yeah. So tibialis posterior. So just a video showing on the other side he is able to flex and invert, but he is not able to dorsiflex and invert. So always check in if you get such a case in examination. In all the nerve palsies, you check the donor tendons also. That will give you additional marks. Okay. So in this case, always check tibialis posterior. What is the power of tibialis posterior? The tibialis posterior is having grade 5 power. We can transfer it for correction of foot drop. So tibialis posterior is the most common tendon taken. There are different methods. Just remember these terms: Ober, bar, and Srinivasan technique. Need to remember Ober over the tibia. Ober over. So circumtibial route we are taking. And insertion is into the third metatarsal. And bar we are making an open. And we are taking the tendon through that opening in the interosseous membrane. Insertion into the lateral or intermediate cuneiform. And Srinivasan technique, it's a two-tail transfer of tibialis posterior. One slip we are attaching to the EHL and one slip to extensor digitorum longus. So thank you very much for your patient listening. There will be one more session after 3 or 4 weeks where we can discuss mainly the brachial plexus injuries. And if you have any doubts or if you want anything to be discussed in these peripheral nerve injuries, if anything is not clear in today's session, you can note this and send me in WhatsApp. I will make it clear. Try my best to make it clear in the next session. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Arun. Is there any questions which you can want to discuss with Dr. Arun now? Dr. Arun, can you ask them a few questions from the sessions you had made? Any 2 questions just to know how much they have learned, which you feel interesting. Not very tough, not very easy as well. Yeah.
Okay,
something.
I will check the name of the participants. Hello, Abhijit. Yeah. Abhijit is there. Abhijit.
Yeah, you can just ask them if somebody wants to answer.
Okay. Somebody, please. So, what are the tendon transfers we use? What are the tendon transfers we use in radial nerve palsy for wrist extension, MCP extension, and thumb extension?
So anybody, let's try out.
Hello.
Jones.
Palmaris longus to
Yes.
EPL.
Palmaris longus to rerouted EPL. Use that term, you will get additional EPL. Mark. Okay, rerouted EPL. Okay. Then
pronated teres to extensor digitorum.
No.
Then FCU to FCU to extensor digitorum.
Yes, very good.
And then
Pronated teres to extensor carpal radialis brevis.
Pronated teres to. So PT to ECRB, FCU to EDC, and Palmaris longus to rerouted EPL.
Rerouted
EPL. Okay. Then one more question. Can somebody tell what is OK sign? We discussed OK sign.
Anterior introsus.
Yeah, anterior introsus nerve palsy. What happens?
The adductor pollicis.
Which all muscles are weak in anterior introsus nerve palsy?
Flexor digitorum profundus and
flexor digitorum profundus. Okay, then
flexor
pollicis longus. So the thumb IP joint, patient will not be able to flex the thumb IP joint and the distal interphalangeal joint when he is asked to make an O. Okay.
Okay. Any more questions?
Okay, sir.
Yeah. Dr. Arun, anyway, we'd like to thank you for your valuable time, and it's very informative. Some of the things are very difficult to grasp for the first time. I think we need to have multiple sessions from you to understand in depth. But as you have rightly said, for the exam, they ask you all these transfers and everything. And most of the time, as a PG student, I still remember, we just know the name, but you try to explain it in detail and the dynamics behind it. It was very interesting. Dr. Divya, you like to add something?
It was like the transfers and all, he simplified it a lot so that it was easier to remember. So I think that was very useful. And OSCE wise, it's usually the clinical, it was really good, I feel. Like, OSCE part had put pictures of the names and asked for.
Nice. That's it.
Hope to have more sessions with you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
So thank you, Dr. Arun. Okay, good night.
Thank you, sir. Thanks. Good night, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Divya. Thanks, everybody. Good night.